Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Let's give people a little time to trickle in. Today's topic is on SSO, everything and all, all of the things you want to know about SSO and what you can do with it in Cypher, how to set it up. Consider this your reference video. Mark is going to give you a full overview of all of the options, including some new updates that we've added to make it even more flexible than before. So with that, I'm going to transfer the floor over to Mark to give you the overview and the walkthrough.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. So today we'll talk through all of the things SSO, single sign-on. In reality, for a lot of people using a new platform, one of the most feared settings, because it always feels as if you are right on that edge of technical knowledge and trying to figure out how it's going to work, and becomes that struggle to get it all put together. So first and foremost, the most important thing to understand is what single sign-on does for you and how that can improve your life as a platform administrator. So single sign-on is always just that way to provide a consistent way for your users to log on across all of the different platforms that they use, whether that be CYPHER or other platforms that are used in your business. It gets rid of that need for user management with single passwords and usernames and password resets for every single application that you use, and gives you one source of truth for logins. What that also means is, as a platform administrator or as a business owner, when you're managing the people in your platform, you only have one place that you have to go. So you can control access to all of your applications in a single click and make sure that it is easy to offboard someone as well as easy to onboard someone into your platforms. So when you're thinking through that, there's a number of ways that you're going to approach this. There are a variety of different types of single sign-on providers, and we work with many of those. The first one to think about is standard integrated platforms like Google Workplace and Microsoft 365. So if you use those already for your business to manage things like your emails and your Office documents, file storage, that also can be used as your single sign-on platform. Then we get into specialized platforms, which are ones that are used and sold purely as access management. And for that, one of the big ones that we work with here is Auth0. And then finally, there are a number of industry standards that allow your applications to work together and allow you to use a variety of those applications. The two big ones with that are SAML, SAML, and OAuth. Both of those support interoperability between your different applications. So we'll take a look at all of those as we go through the day today, but we're going to start off with one of the easiest ones, which is the integrated platforms, and we're going to take a look at how to set up Google as your single sign-on provider. So we're going to jump over here and we're going to take a look at the platform. And I'm going to put this into full screen here so we have good view of everything. And we're going to install now our single sign-on application for Google. So I'm going to go into the App Center. And when I do that, I can filter this very quickly to authentication, which is where you'll find all of our single sign-on providers. And I'm going to install the Google Workplace SSO. When I do that, I will now have on my left-hand admin bar a new section for single sign-on. So that's where we're going to head. So once we do that, we can see I've got Google Apps as a single sign-on. It's not enabled right now, so I come in here and I'm going to configure that. And this is where it becomes extremely easy to configure with Google. All I have to do is add in the domain name that is used for my Google Workplace, and configuration is done. So with that, it becomes pretty simple. There's an additional option here called silent authentication. That is an option that is available with most of our single sign-on providers, which allows you, if someone has a direct link to your platform, so you send out a link, for example, to a specific course. If you are using single sign-on and they're already enabled and logged into their Google Workplace in this case, that's just going to bypass the login automatically and send them directly to the page you ask and not have them log in again onto the CYPHER platform. So once I have that configured, I simply click on Save, and you can see it is now enabled, and I can manage that throughout the entire section. So now if I log out of the platform and I can click on my login button, you can see I now have a login with Google option that's available to me there, and I can choose all of those different options to go through. So I'm going to go back in as myself here on the administration side. And then let's take a look now at some of the other options that are a little bit more difficult to go through. So we're going to take a look at a more specialized provider, and that is Auth0. So I'm going to come in here now, and we're going to enable, again, that authentication. And I'm going to install Auth0. So when we do this, I still have my single sign-on on the left here, but I have multiple options now. And I can have multiple single sign-on options as I go through. So when I do this and I go into configure, this is where we start to see a little bit more complex configuration. Google's very simple to work with. This gets into the more technical side of things as we go through everything. So we'll spend a little bit more time here. And as we go through, if you want to refer back as you're working within your own site, all of the step-by-steps for this are in our knowledge base under the Knowledge Center. And you can view all of the steps for each of these integration providers to walk you through how to set it up. So for Auth0, you see I've got all sorts of different fields that are done here with a domain, client ID, client secret, all of these different options. And that's where this gets more complex, and you have to always work with two different sides of your provider. So things need to be updated in the CYPHER platform and on the Auth0 side. So that's where it becomes much more difficult to understand what you're going through and where those step-by-step instructions come in. So I'm going to jump over to Auth0 here in just a second. And I'm in my Auth0 administrative interface right now. And I'm going to go in and take a look at the application that is set up for me to be able to configure the CYPHER platform. When I do that, you can see all of that information that we just talked about with domain, client ID, and client secret is all provided in Auth0. And it is very easy for me to copy and paste that information into my site. So we're going to start off doing that. We'll go back over and we're going to add in the domain. We're going to add in a client ID. And I'm copying the client secret now. And we're going to add that in. So now other options, these are more specialized for Auth0 with database name and audience. We're just going to default to our standard audience in this case. So we'll work through that. You also see all of these different options down here. We talked about silent authentication. Auto login is a way to, if you are only using Auth0 as your single sign-on and no one has access via password, you can enable this, and rather than having to click on the login button, it will take them directly to the Auth0 interface when you go to and click login. The other two options, auto creating accounts and auto creating users, are what make it easier for you to automate a lot of your account management. So if I auto create an account, if it doesn't exist, That's going to allow me to quickly and easily go through and create new users in the Cypher platform when that is done in the Auth0 platform. So as soon as they try to log in, it's going to create a user based on your first name and last name that are stored already in the Auth0 platform. On the other side, if I'm creating users in the Cypher platform, we can also create users in the Auth0 platform based on the information you enter in Cypher. So for me, I'm going to stay with just those simple forms, and you can see I'm now enabled and have all of these different options here. But we're going to go back over to the Auth0 because, like I said, you have to work on both sides. In order for this to work, you need to work with updates to the Cypher side and to the Auth0 side. So a big part of that is making sure you enter in the proper callback URLs, web origins, all of those different types of data need to be added in. So I'm going to copy these in. Just to save time, I've already created all of this and have it ready to go. The instructions for how to do this are all in our knowledge base of what URLs you need to put into each option. So I'm quickly adding in the logout URL. And now I'm going to add in the allowed web origin, which is your Cypher site. So I'm adding all of that in and saving it. And now I will actually have access to the Auth0 integration. So again, going back over to the Cypher platform, I have this created with not auto-creating users right now. So if I log out, I'm now taken back to my portal. And when I click login, you can see I now have a login with Auth0 button. As I click that, I'm taken to Auth0's integration. And I'm going to use my dummy email address. And what you're going to see is getting an error because that user doesn't have an account on the platform. So if I had created users automatically, it would take me into logging in. But this allows you to control whether those accounts are automatically created or whether you control that access manually or through other integrations. So with all of that, you can control and manage that. I do know it appears there were some chats that were coming in as we were going through that. Caitlin, is there anything that we need to answer at this time? Caitlin, you may be on mute, but I see here. So there was
Yeah, sorry. I
one.
just
No, yeah, that's fine. I got it pulled up now. So we had a question. This is probably related to the Google with providing would it work with provisioning Cypher with Entra ID? So Entra ID is the Microsoft equivalent. So we do have the Microsoft Entra, and it's a very similar process to the Google Authenticator to go into there.
Yeah. And then we do have a question from Ivan in the Q&A saying, with our platform allowing external and internal users, would an admin login option confuse a basic learner?
Yes, so you can actually turn that off. So that is something that can be turned on and off as you go through. And let me get back in there. And for some reason, my password manager is not allowing me in. So 1 second. I have to do this the old-fashioned way. This is where we can see the benefit of having single sign-on and not having to go through this. All right. So as we go back in, there are a number of different ways to control and modify your portal, and removing the admin login button is one of those options, and that's controlled in your visitor view. You can, whether you have that full portal, just a login page, all of those options are configurable here, and you can remove that admin login button. So that simplifies it. I'm keeping it this way so I can go back and forth between them. Sometimes not so easily if I don't have my password easily accessible, but that allows me to jump back and forth. But that is something that certainly can be removed from there. All right, so now that we have the ability to set up the auth0, let's take a look at another scenario. And that is a scenario where you may have one single sign-on provider for your internal users. So you have all of your employees that have access, but then you have an external partner. And for them, you use secondary logon. So perhaps that is something that is managed through Salesforce, for example. If you use Salesforce and you want them to have the same login experience with Salesforce as they do with the CYPHER learning platform. So that's an area where we get into the industry standard logins. So we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at one of those options. There we go. So again, we're coming in and we're going to enable our authentication here. We're going to take a look at those options. And we're going to use SAML 2.0 to be our single sign-on provider. In my example, Salesforce with Salesforce Identity is able to be a SAML SSO provider. So you could have them use their login from Salesforce to connect to the CYPHER platform. Or CYPHER is also able to act as an identity provider for other platforms. So you can see I've got two different options here. So we're going to focus on the SAML 2.0 single sign-on, which allows me to use an outside platform to log into CYPHER. If you wanted to use CYPHER to log into outside platforms, for example, if you have a contract with a third-party content provider that you want to link out to, we can certainly support that too, and our third-party content platforms have that capability built into them as well. So that is an option as well, but we'll focus on using an outside provider to come in as your login controls for CYPHER. Now, what I want to do is, since this only applies to my external partners and doesn't apply to my internal employees, we're going to set this up a little bit different. So we're going to go into our organizations over here, and I have an organization for external partners, which is a parent organization for all of my different external partners. And once I do that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go into Portal. I've got a separate URL for them to log in, for example. And same thing, I have all of those different types of portals, but now I can change the single sign-on provider for this organization. So right now, it's set to use the site-wide providers, which were the Google authentication we saw earlier, and the auth0 that we just set up. But in this case, we want to have this organization use SAML. So we're going to switch that, and we're going to go in and configure it. And now we get into what looks a little bit more complex to set up. And this is one of the ones that is always intimidating as you look at it for the first time. So for this, you can see we've got an ID attribute. So this is what portion of the SAML information we get is used to identify the user. SAML by itself defaults to name ID. So unless your provider tells you something different, that's what we're going to use. And you can just leave it empty. The next part is how you're going to match users. Is it by email? Is it by username in the SAML system? Or is it by some other unique ID? So we'll set that up with email for our case here and get everything through. Now we get to similar to Auth0, where we have to enter information from our outside provider. So in my case, I'm going to use CYPHER as a single sign-on provider as well. So I have a separate portal on a different server that I'm going to use to log in so we can see what that looks like. So I've already set up a provider in my outside platform. So I can see I've got an entity ID. Great. So we're going to put in our entity ID. Next one I need is the login URL or authentication URL. So I'm going to copy that and put that over. Then you have a logout URL. So this is where you want people to go if they use, as I've been doing here, the button to log out of the platform. By default, as it does right now, it's going to take you to your portal landing page with your login options and any external portal content. So you can leave that blank, but if you want it to go somewhere else, you can put in the URL where you want them to go. And then we're going to have just a standard logout. And then the intimidating part is X.509 certificate. This is your security certificate that helps us to encrypt the entire communications. So in this case, I'm going to go back over here and you can see this big long section that says public certificate. And I need to copy start to end and then copy that over into this field. So doing that gives us the end-to-end encryption. That is also where one of the challenges comes in with managing your SSO over time. Security certificates expire. So there is always a period of time where that certificate is going to expire and you have to update it within your single sign-on. So your single sign-on provider will give you notice when that is about to happen. So you can generate a new certificate. And then it's just a matter of pasting that in here in order to keep the service running for you. So once I have that, everything is configured for standard single sign-on. I once again have that silent authentication that we've talked about and the option to auto-create accounts. With SAML, we have a little bit more flexibility to provide additional information. So your single sign-on provider will give you information on where each different field is located. In our case, if I wanted to auto-create accounts, I can go in here and there's a first name, last name, email, and the LMS ID, the user's user number in the system that can be used as part of the process. So I could certainly add in here first name, last name, and match up that user information. But we're also able to add any other information that is available in the single sign-on provider. So if you have a department or something like that, you can add that in and manually add any additional fields that you want to be created on there. So just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and remove that auto create since we already have our single sign-on set up. So all of that is ready to go. When I click save, you'll see I have a new option up here which says SP metadata. So this is the information that the other system may need. Most single sign-on systems are able to just read this because it is pretty standard. But if your outside system asks for the metadata, then you just need to copy that and provide it over to your single sign-on provider. So now that we have that set up, we're going to go back in and we're going to look at the portal here. And like I said, we have a separate URL for our external partners to log into their system. And now I see what that portal looks like. And I've got login using SAML 2.0 versus having the login with Auth0 and Google that I had on my primary site. The last thing I want to look at with this, though, is what does that look like if you are using other systems? So let me get back here. There we go. So for example, if you are using Salesforce as your login, your customers, your partners may not know that Salesforce uses SAML 2.0, and that may be a less than user-friendly experience. So what we can do is go into your portal settings at the top level, and we have terminology substitutions. So if I do that, I can then change any place that it says SAML 2.0 to say Salesforce. So once I do that, if I come in here and go back to that external partners site again, when I click on this now, oh, I had a typo in there. We can replace that SAML 2.0 with that new setting that I just created. So if I do it correctly, it'll work, but we just replace that terminology and make it a consistent experience for them. So with that, that is a very high-level overview of how to configure SSO within your platform and how to get everything working together. What questions can I answer for you?
I think we have at least one more question that we didn't see before. The question is, can we implement local authentication and link it, for example, sign in with Citizen ID?
So any type of authentication would be through one of the standard providers. So we have those different standards. The three that are used on our platform are LDAP, which is a directory access provider. That is an older standard, but we certainly support that. We use the SAML 2.0 or OAuth. So that authentication needs to be sent to the platform through one of those three standards, but those are all pretty well set up. And then at that point, it's making sure you have that silent authentication turned on so they don't get asked to log in.
I think that's the only questions we have. If you have any more questions for Mark, quickly drop them in. Otherwise, we will wrap up today's session. Thank you for your questions. They always make the session, I think, more valuable for everybody. As always, we will post this recording to both our cypherlearning.com website. You can find them under resources for the CYPHER Live. We also will post this to our YouTube channel, CYPHER Learning. So there's also a playlist there for all of the CYPHER Lives, so you can reference it at any time. And we will email out a link as well in the coming days. So thank you for joining. Thank you to Mark for hopefully demystifying the magic of SSO. Oh, we do have one question coming in. Mark, I see you reading it.
Yes, you can see me reading it. So this is when you enable single sign-on, it does disable the ability to resend login emails. So that is because of the way the system is set up. Since you're using single sign-on, we don't want those people to be using username and password. So we don't have the ability then to send out username and passwords once that is there. So that is done at the entire site level when you do that. And the password reset and sending out passwords is then handled by the SSO provider.
Excellent. Okay. That looks like it might be it. So we'll wrap it up there. As always, here, if you have any sessions that you'd like to see us offer, any questions you have, please do send. You can send me a note directly, or you can send it to the CYPHER info email, or pass it along to your CSM when you're talking, and we'll get it on the books. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Mark.